Officer Nathan Briggs had his hand on the radio when he stepped in front of Judge Alana Rivers, blocking her path just 20 feet from Gate C-17 at Detroit Metropolitan Airport. Her phone showed 6:12 p.m. boarding closed at 6:20. In Chicago, a 3-month-old baby girl named Naomi was waiting with a caseworker, legally hers as of 2 hours ago. And now a uniformed airport officer was staring at her like she was a threat. Before we go any further, tell me in the comments where you're watching from. And if you believe in justice and equal treatment, please subscribe. This story only gets more intense from here. Alana Rivers was 42, calm under pressure, and used to courtrooms, not airport confrontations. She had served as a family court judge in Wayne County for 8 years. She had signed hundreds of adoption orders. She had lectured law students about constitutional rights. But none of that showed on her outside. Today, she wore a simple navy sweater, black slacks, and flat shoes for travel. Her hair was tied back. No robe, no bench, no title floating above her head. Just a black woman hurrying to make her flight. "Ma'am, stop right there," Officer Briggs said. She slowed but did not fully stop. "Officer, my flight is boarding." I said stop. His tone was sharp. People nearby turned to look. Alana stopped. She took one steady breath. "Yes. What's in the bag?" he asked, nodding toward her carry-on. "Clothes, documents, baby supplies." "Baby supplies?" His eyebrows lifted. "Where's the baby?" "In Chicago. I'm going to pick her up. The adoption was finalized today." "Let me see some proof of that." She blinked. "I already cleared TSA. I'm inside the terminal." "Random check," he said flatly. "ID." She handed him her driver's license. He studied it longer than necessary. Looked at her, looked back at the card. "Occupation?" he asked. "I'm an attorney." "What kind?" "Family law." He smirked. "Uh-huh." Her phone buzzed. "Final boarding in 8 minutes." "Officer Briggs," she said, reading his name tag. "I understand security, but I need to board my flight." "You'll board when I'm satisfied." "Based on what?" "You're in a rush. You're nervous." "I'm late. That's not a crime." "Open the bag." "I do not consent to a search without cause." His jaw tightened. "You don't get to tell me how to do my job. And you don't get to violate my rights." That was the moment the air changed. 2 travelers nearby began recording. One whispered, "This doesn't look right." Briggs grabbed her bag and pulled it onto a bench. He unzipped it before she could react. He began pulling things out. Diapers, baby wipes, tiny pink socks, sealed adoption paperwork in a folder. "What is this?" he asked, holding up the court order. "That is a legal adoption decree from Cook County Circuit Court. Could be fake." Her stomach dropped. "Are you accusing me of fraud?" "I'm saying it looks suspicious. Woman traveling alone with baby supplies and no baby, because I'm picking her up." "So you say." People were openly staring now. Her flight app flashed. "Gate closing in 5 minutes." "Officer," she said clearly, "if you intend to detain me, state the charge." "You're not detained." "Then I am free to go." "You're free when I say you're free." A man in a business suit stepped closer. "Sir, what exactly did she do?" Briggs snapped, "Mind your business." Alana took out her phone and began recording. "It is 6:15 p.m., she said calmly into the camera. "I am being prevented from boarding my flight by Officer Nathan Briggs without stated probable cause." "Turn that off," Briggs said. "No." Backup arrived. Officer Leon Grant and Officer Colby Reed. "What's going on?" Grant asked. "Possible trafficking," Briggs said. Gasps. Alana stared at him. "You are accusing me of trafficking a child because I have diapers." Grant looked uncertain. "Ma'am, do you have documentation?" She held up the folder. Yes, finalized today. Reed flipped through the papers. His eyes widened. This has a judge's seal. It's real, she said. Grant looked at Briggs. Nathan. Briggs folded his arms. I don't trust it. You don't trust a court order, she asked. People fake things. Then verify it. Silence. Her phone buzzed again. Gate closed. She closed her eyes for 1 second. Naomi would not be coming home tonight. When she opened them, her voice was colder. Officer Briggs, you have now illegally searched my belongings and made a public accusation of child trafficking. You have prevented me from boarding my flight. This is unlawful detention. You're overreacting, he muttered. No, I'm documenting. Grant spoke quietly to Briggs. Let it go. Briggs shook his head. She fits a profile. What profile? Alana asked sharply. He didn't answer. Airport Police Sergeant Evelyn Cross arrived minutes later. She listened carefully. She reviewed the paperwork. She asked Briggs for specific suspicious behavior. He hesitated. She was rushing. That's not a crime, Cross said. She was argumentative. She asserted her rights. Cross turned to Alana. Ma'am, your name? Alana Michelle Rivers. Cross studied her more closely. Are you Judge Rivers from Wayne County? Yes. Grant blinked. Reed stiffened. Briggs went pale. Cross looked at Briggs slowly. You stopped a sitting family court judge on adoption day. Briggs swallowed. I didn't know. You didn't ask. The crowd murmured. Alana finally said the words clearly. I am a family court judge. And today you treated me like a criminal for carrying baby supplies. Briggs opened his mouth, but nothing came out. Cross straightened. Officer Briggs, step aside. Alana's voice stayed steady. Sergeant, I want an official report filed. And I want body camera footage preserved. You'll have it. Briggs tried one last time. This doesn't have to become a big thing. She looked at him directly. You made it a big thing. The terminal was silent except for distant boarding calls. Alana began placing her baby items back into her bag, hands calm even though her heart was racing. Naomi was waiting in Chicago, and this was no longer just about a missed flight. It was about what happens when power meets prejudice, and someone refuses to look away. The video hit the internet before Alana even reached the parking garage. By 9:00 p.m., the clip had already been reposted across 3 platforms. By midnight, it was everywhere. Black judge accused of trafficking at airport. Officer stops wrong woman. Family court judge misses adoption flight after airport confrontation. The footage was clear. 2 different angles. One from Alana's phone. One from a bystander. Officer Briggs' voice was audible when he said, possible trafficking. The moment he said, she fits a profile, was clipped, replayed, zoomed in, and slowed down. By morning, Detroit Metropolitan Airport's administration building felt like a pressure chamber. Sergeant Evelyn Cross sat at a conference table with Internal Affairs, the airport police chief, and a city legal representative. Chief Randall Hayes leaned forward. Tell me exactly what happened. Cross didn't sugarcoat it. Officer Briggs initiated a stop without articulable suspicion. Conducted a search without consent or warrant. Publicly implied criminal activity without evidence. Failed to de-escalate. The legal representative exhaled slowly. And the subject? Cross paused. Judge Alana Rivers, Wayne County Family Court. 8 years on the bench. Hayes rubbed his forehead. Does Briggs know who she is? He does now. Across town, Alana sat in her kitchen staring at her phone while it vibrated nonstop. Texts from colleagues. Calls from reporters. Emails from advocacy groups. Missed calls from Chicago Child Services. She had to rebook the flight. Naomi would have to spend one more night in temporary care. That was the part that hurt most. Her phone rang again. Judge Rivers, a voice asked. Yes. This is Diane Holloway from Channel 7 News. Would you be willing to comment? No. Just a brief statement. No. She ended the call. Her mother, Patricia, sat across from her at the kitchen table. Baby, she said gently, you don't have to carry this alone. Alana gave a tight smile. I didn't ask for this. But maybe you were chosen for it. Alana looked at the paused video frame on her screen. Officer Briggs standing rigid, her own face calm but unyielding. She whispered, he said I fit a profile. Patricia's eyes hardened. We know what that means. Back at the airport precinct, Officer Briggs sat in an interrogation room with Internal Affairs. Detective Omar Whitfield slid a tablet across the table. Is that you? Whitfield asked. Briggs nodded reluctantly. Why did you suspect trafficking? She was rushing. People rushed to flights every hour. She had baby items without a baby. Is that illegal? No. Did you verify her documents? I tried. Whitfield paused the video at the exact moment Briggs said, she fits a profile. What profile? Briggs hesitated too long. Whitfield's voice was calm. Nathan, you need to answer. Briggs shifted. It's just something we're trained to watch for. Spell it out. Single adult, traveling alone. Adoption paperwork. Nervous. Whitfield stared at him. Is that the official trafficking profile? Briggs didn't respond. Whitfield leaned back. Or was the profile something else? Silence. Meanwhile, the story grew. Civil rights attorney Marcus Ellison held a press conference that afternoon. What happened to Judge Rivers is not an isolated incident, he said into a forest of microphones. It reflects a pattern of discriminatory stops rooted in bias. When authority operates on assumption instead of evidence, constitutional rights are compromised. Alana watched the press conference live. She hadn't contacted Ellison. He contacted her. Her phone buzzed again. This time, it was Chief Hayes. Judge Rivers, he said carefully, I want to personally apologize for what occurred yesterday. I appreciate the call, she replied evenly. An internal investigation is underway. Officer Briggs has been placed on administrative leave pending review. Administrative leave, she repeated. Yes, with pay. A pause. Yes. Her jaw tightened slightly. My daughter spent another night in temporary care. Hayes had no response for that. I will be filing a formal complaint, she continued. And I expect preservation of all footage. It's already secured. After she hung up, she finally allowed herself to feel it. The anger. Not loud. Not explosive. But deep. The kind that comes from being publicly diminished. The next morning, she boarded a new flight. This time, no one stopped her. When she landed in Chicago, Naomi was waiting. Small, fragile, wrapped in a yellow blanket. Alana held her for the first time in a quiet office at Child Services. Hi, she whispered softly. I'm your mom. Naomi's tiny fingers curled around hers. Alana felt tears slide down her cheeks, not from sadness, but from clarity. This fight wasn't just about her. It was about what her daughter would inherit. Back in Detroit, the pressure intensified. Community leaders demanded accountability. Online petitions gathered tens of thousands of signatures. National outlets requested interviews. Officer Briggs stayed home, watching it all unfold on television. His wife turned the TV off. Did you really say that? She asked quietly. He didn't answer. At the airport headquarters, Internal Affairs completed preliminary findings within 48 hours. Violation of protocol. Unlawful search. Failure to articulate reasonable suspicion. Conduct unbecoming. Chief Hayes stared at the report. Prepare the recommendation, he said. Sergeant Cross stood near the window. Termination. Hayes hesitated. The union will fight it. Let them. Across the city, Alana received a letter from the American Civil Liberties Coalition offering legal support if she chose to pursue civil action. She set it aside. For now. That evening, she rocked Naomi gently in her living room. The house was quiet. Her phone buzzed again. This time it was a message from an unknown number. "You ruined my life over a misunderstanding." She stared at it. Then another message followed. "You could have just cooperated." Alana didn't respond. She blocked the number. She looked down at Naomi, asleep against her chest. "No," she whispered softly. "I cooperated enough." The next morning, Chief Hayes held a press briefing. Effective immediately, he announced, Officer Nathan Briggs has been terminated from the Detroit Metropolitan Airport Police Department following violations of departmental policy and constitutional procedure. Reporters shouted questions. Was race a factor? Will there be reforms? Has Judge Rivers commented? Hayes answered carefully, "We are reviewing training protocols and bias recognition standards." But across Detroit, people were already asking a bigger question. If she hadn't recorded it, what would have happened? Alana watched the announcement quietly. She didn't celebrate. She didn't smile. She simply held her daughter closer. Because Chapter 2 wasn't about a man losing his job. It was about a system being forced, even briefly, to look in the mirror. And mirrors don't always reflect what people want to see. The termination didn't end the story. It multiplied it. Within 72 hours, Officer Nathan Briggs filed an appeal through the police union. The statement was brief but strategic. Officer Briggs followed standard safety procedures in what he believed to be a suspicious situation. He denies any racial motivation. Cable news networks picked it up immediately. Some commentators framed it as accountability. Others framed it as overreach. And suddenly, Judge Alana Rivers wasn't just a mother who missed a flight. She was a national headline. At home, Alana muted the television. Naomi slept peacefully in her bassinet beside the couch, unaware that her first week of life with her mother was unfolding in front of millions of strangers. Her phone buzzed again. This time it was a colleague from the courthouse. "Alana," Judge Thompson said gently, "are you prepared for this to follow you into the courtroom?" She knew what he meant. Defense attorneys questioning her impartiality. Litigants whispering. Attorneys fishing for bias claims. "I've spent 8 years applying the law fairly," she replied calmly. "That won't change." But privately, she knew something had shifted. Not her judgment. Her awareness. Across town, the union held a press conference of their own. Union Representative Carl Monroe stood behind a podium flanked by officers. Officer Briggs made a call in the interest of child safety. Monroe said, "We must be careful not to punish officers for being proactive." A reporter raised her hand. Did he have probable cause? Monroe dodged. He had reasonable concern. Based on what? Monroe paused. The clip of Briggs saying, "She fits a profile," replayed on screens across the country again that night. The question grew louder. What profile? In the airport administration building, new policies were quietly being drafted. Mandatory bias training. Revised stop and search guidelines. Clearer documentation standards. Sergeant Evelyn Cross sat in a strategy meeting. "We can't just fix this because it went viral," she said firmly. "We fix it because it was wrong." Some nodded. Some stayed silent. Change is rarely unanimous. That weekend, Alana received a handwritten letter. No return address. Inside was a simple message. "Thank you for standing firm. My daughter was stopped last year, and no one believed her." Alana read it twice. Then she placed it carefully inside Naomi's baby book. Because this was bigger than one encounter. It was about precedent. And precedent, she understood deeply. The union appeal hearing was scheduled for the following month. Meanwhile, civil rights organizations began reaching out to Alana, asking if she would consider filing a federal civil rights lawsuit. Marcus Ellison called again. "You have grounds," he said. "Unlawful detention. Constitutional violation. Emotional distress. She looked at Naomi sleeping against her shoulder. "I'm not interested in revenge," she said quietly. "This isn't revenge," Marcus replied. "It's accountability." She didn't answer right away. Because accountability is complicated when you're the one holding the gavel. One evening, weeks later, Alana returned to the airport. Not for travel. For a community forum. Airport leadership had organized a public discussion on bias and policing. They had asked her to speak. The room was full. Travelers, officers, activists, reporters. Chief Randall Hayes opened the session. "We are here to listen," he said. When it was Alana's turn, she walked to the podium without notes. She didn't mention anger. She didn't mention humiliation. She didn't mention fear. Instead, she said this: "Power requires discipline, authority requires restraint, and suspicion requires evidence." The room was silent. "I was not stopped because of what I did," she continued. "I was stopped because of what I represented in someone else's mind." She paused. "And if it can happen to a judge, it can happen to anyone." A quiet murmur moved through the crowd. An officer in the back shifted uncomfortably. Another nodded slowly. "I don't want apologies," she finished. "I want better." She stepped away from the microphone. No applause at first. Then a few hands. Then many. The union appeal concluded 2 weeks later. The Independent Review Board upheld the termination. Their summary was concise. The officer failed to demonstrate reasonable suspicion. Conduct reflected bias inconsistent with department standards. The case could still move to arbitration. But the message was clear. Procedure matters. Documentation matters. Bias matters. Months passed. The headlines faded. Naomi grew. Alana returned fully to her courtroom. But something else had changed. When litigants stood before her now, nervous, defensive, misunderstood, she saw them a little differently. Not with sympathy alone, with recognition, because she had stood in a public space and been misjudged. And she had chosen not to shrink. One afternoon, while reviewing case files in chambers, her clerk knocked softly. "Judge Rivers," he said, "there's a request here from a law school. They'd like you to guest lecture." "On what topic?" she asked. He glanced at the paper. "Constitutional rights in everyday spaces." She allowed herself the smallest smile. "Schedule it." That night, she rocked Naomi to sleep. The house was calm. The world had moved on to the next controversy. But she knew something important had happened. Not because a man lost his badge. Not because a video went viral. But because, in a moment of public pressure, she had refused to surrender her dignity. And sometimes, dignity is the quiet revolution no one expects. This wasn't just a story about an airport. It was a story about assumption versus evidence, about power versus restraint, about how a single moment, recorded, witnessed, challenged, can ripple outward. Naomi stirred slightly in her arms. Alana whispered softly, "You will grow up knowing your rights, and you will never apologize for standing in them." The airport terminal returned to its normal rhythm. Flights boarding, passengers rushing, announcements echoing. But somewhere in its halls, policy had changed. Training had shifted, and officers thought twice before saying, "She fits a profile." The end.